and medium-sized enterprises as well. And how this can propel the business to identify opportunities and also looking at the challenges. Today we have a huge, quite a variety and interesting group of panelists, and they have such dynamic backgrounds and such good experiences globally as well. And we would go forward and then just looking at, firstly, we have Bettina Heller from United Nations, and we'd like to thank UNEP and BSR for organizing this event. Just a short introduction from Bettina, who is the program officer in the United Nations Environmental Program, and she looks at and coordinates the portfolios on eco-innovation, sustainable business, and she also focuses on SMEs and circularity in the textiles value chain. Bettina, you have the floor to give a short introduction.
Thanks so much, ZEBIDO, and also from my side, a warm welcome to everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're really happy to hold that session together with BSR, and we're very excited about this nice panel that we have here today, and we're very much looking forward to hearing from them and then discussing with all of you. If we can go to the next slide. In my introduction, I just wanted to set the scene and introduce you to a few of the concepts that are the basis for our discussion today. So first of all, of course, the session is about circularity in the textile value chain. And this is one way to depict the circular textile value chain that we are aiming to move towards too. So you can see here a value chain that is closing the loops, but that is also keeping materials in the loop at the highest value for a long time. So what is really needed is we need to make systemic changes in the textile value chain, and we need to move from the current system, which is very much linear, which is very much based on a fast move through the loop to a more circular system where garments and other textile products are valued and kept in the loop for a long time. Now, for UNEP, we conceptualize circularity as a model to transform the current textile economic model towards a sustainable future. And this requires governments, businesses, and consumers to look beyond this current take, make, dispose, extractive model and to redefine growth, focusing on positive society-wide benefits. So the underlying objective is that materials should be kept at their highest possible value as they move and are retained as long as possible within the textile value chain. What you can see here in the more brownish color are the value retention loops that we can rely upon to make circularity in textiles a reality. So the overarching principle is reduce by design, but then we have other loops which are refuse and reduce, reuse, repair, repurpose, and finally recycle. And I just wanted to emphasize that there is a hierarchy here, and in our opinion, we have to focus most importantly on reduce by design, because sustainable design choices can ensure that negative environmental as well as socioeconomic impacts are minimized or eliminated across the value chain, and that positive outcomes are enabled by creating features that allow for other sustainable actions. So for instance, if we think about designing a product in a way to eliminate the need for specific chemical heavy processes, this will also help to increase the product lifespan and make it easier to repair or recycle the product, and also safer for the user and the worker. Now, if we can go to the next slide, please. The other concept that is very important in today's discussion is the concept of circular business models. And this is something that is very important and at the heart actually of this transition towards a more circularity in the textile value chain. Of course, the predominant business model that we have in the textile industry at the moment has to change. It has to become more sustainable and circular. And this involves both how the business defines its strategy, how it derives value for its products, but also how products are presented to the consumer. So our customers buying into new models such as rental or repair. Now, we would like to bring in the concept of eco-innovation, which is a concept that UNEP is applying to help particularly SMEs, so small and medium-sized enterprises in developing countries, to develop and diversify their sustainable and circular business models. The idea is to have a very strategic approach that looks first into the business strategy or the vision of the business, incorporates sustainability, so all three levels of sustainability at that level, and then translates that into more circular business models, which then also has changes on the operations and on the processes and products of a company. It is a process and a methodology that also relies heavily upon value chain cooperation. And so it is very much about working with partners along the value chain and trying to involve them in this transition. We should understand, however, that there are also some potential trade-offs when moving towards more circular business models. And we have to ensure a just transition, and we have to be aware of those trade-offs and to de-risk them. And this is, of course, where due diligence comes in. And we will hear a bit more about that from Laura. I'll hand back to Zubeida.
Thanks, Bettina. That was very interesting and gives us very good basis of circular business models. And we would like to then follow through to Laura, who is a manager at BSR, and she currently works on keeping workers in the loop on this specific project, which is basically a collaboration of industry leaders and stakeholders exploring the just transition of the fashion industry. So Laura will give us a bit of background to the specific project and definitely lay the platform for our discussion going forward. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to all participants. And yes, as we consider due diligence in a circular fashion system, I'm thrilled to offer some insights on the often overlooked social dimensions of circularity and how we can significantly change the value chain and also how this will impact due diligence. Via keeping workers in the loop, we explore the potential impacts on workers of a major transition to a circular fashion and how we can enable a just, fair, and inclusive system. Next slide, please. So indeed, circularity's momentum presents a unique opportunity to reimagine the global fashion system. However, without the right policies in place, it could create more inequality and perpetuate the same unacceptable working conditions as the today's linear system. Next slide. First, we found that informal workers, women and migrants are key to circularity, but are especially vulnerable. Why? Many parts of the value chain expected to expand under a circular system are the most likely to rely on informal workers, and at the same time, parts of the industry that are already circular today, such as waste picking and sorting for recycling and resale, have some of the worst labor conditions and negative social impacts on communities. Some of the primary concerns we found in our research for circular workers is that harassment, long working hours, and low levels of association and representation are still common amongst this group of workers. Further, marginalized populations are often invisible in the system, and as such, they cannot access formal channels for workers' rights and social protection, presenting additional challenges as the industry increases reliance on such workers, as I mentioned before. So here, next slide, please. Here we see how transforming to a circular value chain introduces new economic activities. Many groups of workers will expand or be newly introduced into the global fashion system. It is crucial that due diligence and responsible sourcing understand and address the specific risks and opportunities faced by groups like organic farmers, recyclers, second-hand sellers, and waste pickers, as you see here in this image. Next slide. We also found that circularity, automation, global trade, and other macro forces could significantly disrupt job numbers across the fashion industry by 2030, affecting those in the lowest paying jobs. We created economic scenarios that contemplated the impact of these macro forces. Considering both potential job losses and gains, we see a spread of almost 7 million jobs impacted in the industry by 2030. This disruption was particularly pronounced in the traditional production countries and especially in China and in India. But most worryingly, most scenarios see a decline in wages for low-skilled jobs across geographies and often an increase in high-skilled wages. To tackle this inequality, we found that a circular fashion presents an opportunity for entrepreneurship and upskilling. Circularity can definitely spawn entrepreneurship in the industry, especially alongside digitalization. And we see this as a great opportunity for women's entrepreneurship and for SMEs participation. In terms of skills, circular value chain roles will vary widely. They will be more multifunctional and require greater creativity. And to perform these new roles, soft skills such as agility, tolerance for ambiguity, and technical skills, especially related to digital literacy, will also be key. However, we found a huge gap amongst skills and training as well. 40% of the survey, the people that respond to our survey in Europe and in the US, and 62% in India have never received training at work to perform their circular jobs. So circularity's impact on the industry prompts questions on how due diligence can both enable and must respond to circular system. Most importantly, due diligence should enable the participation of diverse actors, including the most vulnerable workers, to participate fairly in the circular marketplace. Due diligence will be important to understand the specific risk in new economic activities, for example, those emerging in recycling cotton production or in reverse logistics, key activities in the circular system. It is also important to align on responsible business principles and adapt the due diligence process to the new reality of these new business models. Lastly, it is key to design due diligence and inflexibility to make sure the systems will be inclusive and accessible to all actors. Inflexible and heavy due diligence process can hinder the participation of SMEs and the most vulnerable workers in the system. I offer some thoughts on the role of due diligence right now, how due diligence can play, and and now we look to the perspective of a brilliant panel on these important questions and the intersection of due diligence and circularity. Thanks everyone, and I'll just mention that we're currently exploring the potential of collaboration to enable a just and circular transition. And if you're interested in joining us, please contact me. You see here my email address, and you'll also find our findings and recommendations on the BSR website. I will then hand it over to Zubeida. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. That was also very good background to circularity and the impact on due diligence and how they interrelate to each other. We've got quite a list and a host of panelists today, and they've got, we'll start off just to give you a bit of structure of how the panel is going to work. If you have any questions, I will introduce the panelists one by one, and I'll ask them, pose them a set question. And if you have any specific questions from the audience, you're welcome to use the chat box, or you're welcome to raise your hand as well. And then I will introduce them one by one. And then we'll have a discussion also later on with enough time available to address any concerns or any questions or queries that you may have. Let me hand over, or rather introduce our first panelist, who is the impact lead from H&M Group. And she's Linda Ingoldsdottir. Linda works within the H&M Group's Fair Jobs agenda, and with the purpose to secure fair jobs across H&M's Group's value chain. She's been working with social sustainability programs within H&M's Groups, and also has experience working in Bangladesh and China, and she moved back to Sweden to work with her current role. Linda, I would like to present a question to you. H&M, we know, has done quite a large amount of work in sustainability and circularity. How has implementing due diligence made any impact on the transition towards circularity within your business and organization?
Well, thanks first of all for inviting me to this panel. It's great to be here and to discuss this important topic. I think I will personally learn a lot from the other panelists as well. But thanks for the question. To answer that, how due diligence has an impact, I think it actually is a little bit too early to see a clear impact as of today. We are still in the beginning phase of our journey to become fully circular, and H&M Group really has the ambition to become fully circular as soon as possible. However, we are tracking a lot of data. We are looking into both environmental aspects and social aspects, such as our carbon footprint and average monthly wages for workers in our production supply chain. So we can track progress. But impact as such is a little bit too early to discuss. But I think that we, as one of the biggest fashion retailer today, we are really responsible to take a lead in this circular journey, I would say. And if we look at then the environmental aspects, I think that we are currently doing what we can in terms of investments, looking into re-commerce, rental, etc., and see how we can become more circular and provide our customers with more circular products. And on the social side, it's a lot. I mean, I would say the foundation is really to make sure that all people across our value chain have the ability to negotiate on their working conditions and to raise their voices. And that we can do through due diligence in different ways. But I will stop there and let the others in.
So you see there is a relationship between, for instance, you have environmental risks, which is part of, meeting due diligence, and you're able to then have some sort of positive impact on the organization. If you meet requirements for due diligence, then you are able to also meet, moving towards a more circular business environmental model as well. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I would like to emphasize that I think enabled to secure a just and fair transition to becoming fully circular, we need to work with due diligence and we need to be a responsible business partner in the industry. So yes, it goes hand in hand and it enables each other, so to say. Definitely.
Thank you, Linda. I will definitely come back to you a bit later. I just want to give everybody a chance initially to speak a bit. We secondly have Cindy Rhodes, and she has started an organization back in 2005 called Worn Again Technologies, a very interesting organization which is tackling the huge global problem of textile waste. And this started, in 2012. Cindy can correct me. So the company is also looking at development of polymer recycling technology for polyester and cotton textiles. Cindy, that's a very interesting background. Do you want to just, I just want to ask you a quick question around, your business is obviously focused on the circular business model and shifting towards, shift your organization towards looking at what's commercial, social, environmental benefits have you seen, and how have you possibly tracked or measured these? If there has been any benefits for your organization, how have you tracked this?
Thanks, ZEBIDO. Good to be here today. Hello to everyone joining the call, and thank you for the question. I think we start from a very different position to H&M in that, as you said, ZEBIDO, we've developed a polymer recycling technology for polyester and cotton waste textiles. So it can be from the post-consumer textile supply chain once clothing has been used beyond the point of reuse. It can also our process can take in post-industrial textile waste as well from some of the higher volume manufacturing regions. And so we are, at the moment, we're still pre-commercial. And we are moving into the demonstration plant phase of our technology. So we're at the very early days. Where we are focused is, well, firstly, as soon as we move to a first industrial plant, our business model is based on licensing the technology to plant operators around the world. So that can happen in some of the higher consumption regions like Europe and in the US, as well as post-industrial textile waste regions. And so with that licensing will come, all sorts of compliance issues around ILO, ISO standards, and that sort of thing. But our goal really with this, with the license, is to develop a circular licensing model that goes above and beyond the existing measures today, where we take in the mindset of circularity, where it's not just about the environment, but it's also about social standards and really improving the lives in the industry where our plants are operating. But just to finish on that, I think, our business model is yet to be launched, but a very important aspect of that will be in the sourcing of our end of use textiles. And that's key. So upstream to our process. And, this is a very important area today in that it is an area in terms of sorting and collection of end of use textiles where there's maybe less transparency, and we need more regulations brought into this area to bring more standards to collection of textiles and to improve workers' lives of the people collecting and sorting textiles today. But I'm sure we'll get into that a bit in the conversation.
So you foresee with those standards and also with the licensing that you are able to then monitor and sort of measure exactly, globally, worldwide, or these different organizations, how there'll be more transparency forthcoming. Where does the resources come from, materials come from, and how they actually take it through the process itself? Do you foresee that going forward?
Exactly. I think that's going to be one of the key components of circularity that will help improve the industry. This idea of transparency and traceability, where the brands and retailers who are ultimately selling the end products need to know more and will demand from us to understand and know and have certifications around where our inputs came from so that they can then communicate that onto their customers.
Okay. That's interesting. Let us go to our next panelist, which is the CEO and Program Coordinator, Anujita Sharma. She's from Siwa Bharat, which is an organization committed to strengthening the movement of women in the informal economy by highlighting the issues at the national level within India. The Siwa movement has been around for over 40 years. So they've got vast experience, and they develop programs and activities that organize women so they can aim to achieve full employment and self-reliance. Anujita, thank you for being with us. Nice meeting you. And just to give you an initial question, in terms of the level of activity carried out by the informal economy, poses a risk on compliance with social and environmental standards and regulations. What are the priority challenges facing informal workers, which I understand you've got probably vast experience in, and how would you like to see the industry address this as it increases the reliance on informal workers through the mainstreaming of circularity, as we've heard with the previous two speakers as well?
Thank you, Zubeda. I would like to really thank you and the team for inviting me here. I'm really glad to be a part of this sessions and really looking forward to learn from other speakers as well. In SEBA, my experience and my thought is going to be slightly different for our fellow speakers, because I'm going to speak from our workers' point of view, because we work with the informal sector women. And as Ruab, the producer company, Ruab Seba Artisans Producer Company, is a very small social enterprise which is committed to promote livelihood for home-based workers who are technically artisans in nature and working in garment supply chain. Okay, so before COVID, we were not very keen towards working and promoting the product towards the circular fashion. Okay, because we were normally working with the different export houses which work with the other brands, and then so our main objective was to promote work and fetch works from the industry for our informal sector women who is unaware about their own efficiency and the role they play in the supply chain as a workers. So that was our main role. Since the COVID has hit India and the entire globe, and we started getting queries from our buyers and the clients with whom we work for the upcycling, recycling, and regarding the product that can be marketed in the circular fashion model. So the main challenge what we face is that our workers are not that informed about such concepts as a circular fashion, though they are doing those things, right? Even if you look at the home-based workers, the garment they are wearing, and tomorrow they will be turned those the pillow covers and the bed sheets. This is what exactly that you use your product and make another one, but they are not their thought process is it not be directed that this is exactly the circular fashion and recycling upcycling is. So training them is one of the main challenge that we have, and making them aware about the concept itself. Plus, the when we talk about the circular fashion and the upcycling and all, the fashion trend plays a quite interesting and important role. So again, you have to organize that sort of upskilling training for them, so they can meet the demands of the market. They can learn how to go ahead, they can learn the technical concepts of the entire the scenario we are talking about. Those things become really important. And then what we have to do, we have to arrange a number of capacity building events for them. We have to organize exposure visits for them, so they understand what we are talking about, and then they find themselves in that mainstream workplace and the new changes that we are trying to acquire for themselves. Because if we don't do that, they will be deprived of the work, because then the clients and buyers coming to us, we are meeting with them, and they are demanding for those products and upcycling, recycling. And then if we are not able to answer them, and our worker is not able to perform that task and produce that sort of product, so of course we are not going to get the order. So keeping workers up to date with the changes going on in the markets, in terms of your environmental change and the policy change, is really important. And again, the policy and the environment and the due diligence we talk about has to simplify it in their own version, because they are not going to understand that complicated and that other big words and the concept that we talk about. So the translations and the simplifications become really important. And so they feel comfortable about, they feel respected. So they are getting to know through their own languages, and we respect
Yeah.
their individuality. So those things are really important. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, a lot of training actually and capacity building coming through there, trying to keep people, making sure that they are aware of the changes, and capacity building, ensuring that people are empowered and how they actually go about, adapting to these new changes and within the circular business models that is being presented to them. So that's quite interesting there. Let me just introduce our another panelist, Alan Munsami. He's from South Africa, and he is the HRO for Planet Events, and they're currently a footwear company in Durban, KZN. And they have done some interesting things based on circular business models, looking at more sustainable footwear for their organization. Alan, can you give us a little bit of background to your journey towards circularity and incorporating circular business models in your organization?
Hi, good afternoon to everyone. And thanks for the opportunity to be part of this panel discussion, which I believe is absolutely important. As we all aware that we are in the era of the fourth industrial revolution and sustainability. And that's how important it is. And I trust that by the end of our discussion, we will be able to achieve at least something. At Planet Events, I must quote, before I go any further, the words of our CEO, Mr. Paul Moodley, who is the visionary of the business. And I quote his words. He says that we live in a planet, and what we do is an event. So that's why the company is called Planet Events. So everything that we do here becomes an event. And just to share a little bit background is, prior to 2017, we were only a component manufacturer for footwear. And during 2017, there was a huge flood where our products, which was packed in cardboard boxes, were floating all over the shore. And of course, the CEO decided, look, and the first thing was, we decided, instead of using cardboard, invest away the cardboard boxes, and we wanted to make crates, plastic crates, the polycop crates, regenerated materials.
Ellen, I think you're breaking up a bit.
And we make it to. In fact, some of the pictures, if you can see this, that machine. Now,
Ellen,
that
we keep on losing you. Perhaps you could turn off your camera while you speak, just for a bit, to see if that improves the sound. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think because
Okay,
everybody has the cameras on. Thanks.
Okay, let me just turn on. Is that okay now?
Yes, we can hear you well, Alan.
Okay. Now these components, so you can see that we try to become eco-friendly. And these boxes are, when it breaks, we reuse it. We regenerate that material. That was, by the way, our model of ours was when we moved into new premises.
Ellen, you're still
Take
stuck
away
in
this
the
asbestos roofs. Can you hear me?
It's a bit breaking.
Either to another new innovation to invest in roof sheeting. And I'll tell you why we invested in that. Not good for business and for the machinery that we have here.
Ellen, I think it's still breaking a little bit. Is it possible just to give a very, very short description of, in terms of sustainability, what maybe list one or two challenges that you've had in terms of reaching those circular business models, like you've mentioned recycling. Well, just very short, very quickly, the challenges that you've had internally or externally.
All our products, every single product of ours is recycled. For example, let me give you a typical example from Woolworths.
Zubaida and Ellen, I wonder if maybe, Ellen, we move on to the next speaker while you're trying to see if you can fix the connection, and otherwise perhaps you could post a few messages in the chat just to inform the audience, just in case we don't get you back. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Maybe if you rejoin and then we can, maybe the connection will be better. Thanks, Ellen. Our next panelist we have is from Kenya, and she She is the co-founder of and CEO of Pine Kazi, and very interestingly, they they use recycled pineapple leaves and turn it into eco-friendly fashion products. And I think they use it for leather and for some footwear products as well. Olivia, are you there? I'd like to pose a question for you.
Yes, I'm here.
Thanks for joining us. It was so interesting to read up about your company and also all the things that you recently also won the first fashionomics contest in Africa as well. When did you realize that this circular business model will be beneficial to your community? Basically, just how did you come about this circular business model idea?
Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for that question. So personally, for us and our company, I think the circular business model is something we thought about from the word go when we created the company back in 2019. And that's when we realized that Kenya is one of the largest pineapple producing countries, and a lot of waste is produced after pineapples are harvested, which is either burned or chemically decomposed, and that's not good for the environment. So that's when we started thinking of how we can put this waste into good use and definitely through a more sustainable way. So that's how we started thinking of how we can incorporate circular business model into our business. And we thought that the circular business model would be very beneficial to the community, especially the people we work with, who are mainly disconnected youth and women groups here in Kenya. So we thought that that will be beneficial to the community because in terms of providing employment opportunities. A circular business model is a very viable model to provide employment opportunities and also to create social impact. So that's how just basically we came about circular business model, and we are currently working on a closed loop sort of model whereby our customers can bring back the products and we can recycle the textile and introduce it back into the system again. Yeah. So that's just basically what we do. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And how has your organization looked at due diligence? Have you been required to carry out any due diligence processes, anything from requesting through your supply chain, or any brands that have asked you to do some due diligence audits or anything like that?
Yes, definitely as a brand that positions itself as a circular and sustainable brand, we have had to do due diligence from our suppliers and across the value chain. We've had to do due diligence um, because you cannot call yourself a circular business model if your partners or maybe your suppliers are not incorporating circular models into their businesses as well. So, for example, I'll give a typical example of our dyeing partners. We ensure that they use either natural dyes, which are either plant-based or insect-based dyes. So that is something we really had to do due diligence on and ensure that that they're not using chemical dyes. Same to our transport partners, our packaging partners. We ensure that the materials they're using are materials that can be recycled and are beneficial to the environment. So yeah, definitely we had to do a bit of due diligence.
Okay, so that's quite interesting using natural dyes as well. Just from, maybe I'll go through another panelist and ask a question. Anujita, for example, how can due diligence protect and empower marginalized groups such as informal women and migrant workers? Is that something you would like to tackle for us today?
Yeah, hi Zubeda, that sounds really good. And so we really believe that due diligence is a good tool to protect the basic rights of our home-based workers, especially women. Because when we talk about the due diligence, there's a set of rules and compliance that comprise the entire process of due diligence. That is the protecting basic human rights, decent working conditions, and minimum wage and the equal pay to the women. So when these things are there, so these due diligence help us to advocate the rights of these women. So we have certain base to talk about. When we talk about the artisans, they don't know about anything. They are not aware about their basic rights and all. But we know we have a tool, we have a weapon to talk about when we talk about their working conditions and all. So those due diligence protect their basic rights, such as the equal pays, decent working conditions. And when we work in the informal sector and work with the contractors and the export houses, they don't even provide a formal contract to the women who is working, and they don't know even the address and the name of that brands they are working with, the contractor they are working with. So through that, when we talk about the due diligence, the processes and all, we include such technical details and we try to talk to them. I would like to mention one scenario in our community. When we work with we had a couple of orders from one of the export houses in Delhi, India, and then our women got 500 pieces of turban, baby turban to make, and then they were making. So even if they lose any of the pieces or they spoil, they stained any of the pieces, they are supposed to fulfill the cost from their pocket. So here then enterprises like Ruab come in the picture, and then we negotiate such conditions at the beginning and the initial stage of the order. When we are talking to the clients and the contractors and the export houses, we make sure that all the conditions, do's and don'ts are discussed on the behalf of the workers. So that's one part. And then we ensure there are a couple of things that most of the export houses and the contractor, they don't disclose the prices, because when we work with them, there are the 2-3 patterns that they follow for the payment to the members. It's like one is that they pay piece rates, like per unit. Like if they are making baby turbans, that it would be INR 10 rupees or 12 rupees. That most of the export houses choose not to disclose the costings, and that it really make difficult for us to mobilize the artisans and encourage them to work on that such orders, because no one would like to work if they don't know how much they are going to pay, getting paid at the end. So such conditions. So when we talk about the due diligence and the other policies included in that, those things help us to negotiate with the buyer and our client, that protect our workers' rights. Yeah.
That lack of transparency, obviously, is a hamper and a
Yeah.
challenge in due diligence as well. So I can understand that. Thank you for that, Anujita. We've got one question. I also just want to draw you attention to the fact that previously, I think Bettina put up some information around circular business models and eco-innovation in the chat. We have one question from Muhammad Awais, and he's asking what circular business models should follow manufacturers, home textiles manufacturer, and how can they start? So this is something that can be tackled by anybody. So what circular business models should a manufacturer follow? I would assume that's, and I assume that he's in the home textiles manufacturing subsector. And where would you start? That is quite an interesting thing. Where would you start when you're starting circular business models? Ellen, where did you start? Can you hear us now? They always say begin at the beginning. Muhammad Awais, do you want to maybe unmute yourself?
Subeda, the chat, the participants are muted, so they cannot unmute.
Oh, okay. Maybe Bettina,
but
you can.
I can have a go, and then I would love to hear from the panel because you all have the hands-on experience. But just from sort of the research that we've done, and I do invite you all to look at the Eco-Innovation Textile supplement that I've posted in the chat that basically gives you step-to-step guide where to start. And for us, it's to really start with the analysis. So looking into where do the biggest impacts lie for your specific company, because this will vary depending on what products you are producing. I think here you said it's about home textiles. Yeah, it will depend on the country. It will depend, for instance, on the energy mix that is being used in the country. So try to start by getting information on where your biggest impacts lie, and then try to make improvements on those. And try not to do it alone, but to work with others in your value chain. So that could be other companies that are in the same cluster as you. That could be your suppliers. I mean, obviously your workers, as we've heard a lot. And then on very general terms, and then you have to specify that to your to what you're doing. But we found that for manufacturers, I mean, one of the big things is to really look at the production process. So for instance, are there any chemicals of concern that you are using that you can phase out? Or are there, what is the energy mix that you are using? Is there a high climate impact because the energy mix comes from a lot of non-renewable energy? Could that process be more resource efficient? What about sort of the wastewater system, etc.? And the other point is to really try to see how you can support your brand clients in their circular business model. So for instance, do they need materials that have a better durability that can be used longer? Or is it about making sure that, again, certain substances aren't in the product so that they can be better repurposed, that they can be better recycled, and that this is also not a threat to the workers who are involved in that? So this is sort of the initial recommendations I would give. But yeah, I'll hand back to the panel because I'm sure they have more firsthand insight.
Yeah, I'm always biased towards eco-innovation and just those two concepts, eco-innovation, life cycle management, and using that as your basis to start off with and starting your questions. And basically, like you're saying, doing a status quo analysis of where you are at currently in your organization, who you're working with, who your stakeholders are, what are your biggest risks and impacts as well. It sounds a lot, but it can be simplified quite a bit because there's a lot of tools out there that is quite useful. Linda and Anujita, let me give Linda an opportunity quickly to answer as well or give us some comment. Thanks, Linda.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just echoing what's been said already. But what I want to add, if you are in the beginning of becoming or creating a circular business model, I would really, emphasize again the holistic approach. I mean, look where you want to be, where are you heading, and what will the impact be on people, your employees, or across the value chain if you're a company like us. So you have that holistic approach from the beginning, because it's so easy to start to focus on the sort of details and the environmental aspects. But I think we have learned that, okay, now we are looking into what is the impact, and not only risks. Of course, there are a lot of opportunities, but the more proactive we can be in terms of skill development, policy frameworks around this, the better end results, I would say. So that's the only thing I want to add.
Thank you, Linda. Anujita, you wanted to add perhaps to that?
Yes, Veda. So in Roab, as I mentioned, that we are a very small enterprise, and so when right now we have started thinking about how to enter in the circular fashion business model. Initially, we were not that aware, I would say, but after COVID, the lots of buyers and clients has been asking for the same. So couple of things that we have started at our own level, since we are not such a big organization, so we are counted under the nano enterprise. So one thing is that, we have trying to adopt a zero waste policy. So whenever we are making the products, how we can focus on the products are not going to get wasted at the end. So how do that? And even if there are left out after the product being manufactured, so what else can be made out of that? That's one part in the manufacturing. And recently in our one of the program, we have started one of the training unit, which is a block printing, on which we are focusing on the natural dyes rather than using up pigments and the rapid colors. So that is one thing. So such small steps we have started taking, and again, and training the artisans on the same. So since they are being trained for the natural dyes block printing, so they are also understanding why we have opted for the natural dyes and vegetable dyes rather than going for the pigments, which is cheaper and less time consuming. Yeah.
Yeah, and also the risks to the social risks also reduces the impact on the people working with the dyes. That's quite important
Definitely.
as well.
Yeah.
We haven't forgotten about Lakshmi's question there, but I wanted to give Cindy an opportunity to add as well. Cindy?
Yes, no, thank you. Just on that question around where to get started, I think you have covered it quite nicely. The other panelists, what I would say is, well, definitely on the raw material sourcing side, understanding the recycling technologies that are in development, the ones that are available today, and developing a strategy, a phased strategy around sourcing and when you can start accessing these recycled and circular raw materials. I think another useful way to get started is to make sure you get engaged in some of the industry working groups, working with the facilitators like Fashion for Good. In India, you've got the what's it called? The Circular Apparel Innovation Factory. Also, if you're not involved with Reverse Resources and their project in Bangladesh, the circular fashion ecosystem, looking at connecting your waste to new recyclers, existing and new recyclers. I think there are a number of ways of getting involved in the market demand side of things, working with the brands who are at the forefront. Just so many ways of just getting involved. It's the big thing is to start, just get started.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, and also the biggest challenge is they not only just to start, but you do need a team behind you, and they're now convincing and getting commitment, and depending on where you are in the organization. So that's quite important as well. Thank you, Cindy. We've got a quick question here from Lakshmi that asks, who asks, is climate-related risks factored into the circularity discussions? And I would say yes, very simply, it is. I don't think if anybody wants to add to that, I think, yeah, it's very straightforward. But thank you for the question. And also then we have another question. It would be interesting to hear from the panelists' views on how due diligence processes can be made flexible so that startups, SMEs, informal workers, and others can participate. Is that clear? So who would want to tackle that? It would be interesting to hear any panelists' views on how due diligence processes can be made flexible. It depends on where you are probably in the supply chain, and it also depends on where you are regionally. If companies, for instance, goes to a brand goes to one of the suppliers that is supplying footwear or garments, they would possibly give them some leeway in terms of time. I've had that experience where companies would say, we want you to become a certain standard compliant, but we'll give you 1 to 2 years to get to that point. So I think that is the type of flexibility that could be incorporated. Anybody else wants to add to that?
I can just jump in and say that I'm asking myself that question, to be honest, as well. I mean, how do we become flexible? Of course, we need to secure good due diligence and, minimum requirements. But I really think that we need to be flexible and agile going forward to not risking of excluding great innovations and great ideas. How? I don't have the answer myself, but I think really, collaboration is also key here to gather the industry, work representatives, brands, suppliers, SMEs. I mean, everyone together to see how can we create this together? I mean, how do we create the best circular fashion industry that we can with good and flexible due diligence? And also policies and maybe even legislation around it to create sort of a level playing field in the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's quite key that you've mentioned. There's being inclusive and also leveling the playing field, that countries sort of are on the same level. For instance, out in our region, we do have, South Africa's got very strict labor laws, and in some ways, obviously not in some ways, it protects the laborers and the workers in the organizations. But to some extent also, if you compare the cost of labor, which is minimum wage, is much higher in South Africa than our neighboring countries. So that is quite a key element as well that comes into play. Alan, you wanted to add as well to that?
Yeah, I think I must fully concur with you. The South African labor laws, and especially when you have your collective agreements, it's very difficult.
Can you switch off your camera, Alan? You're stucking again.
Our minimum wage as well. And then you have the Asian countries that we are competing with. And believe you me, our product comes nowhere near to the product and the cost price of the Asian companies, example, China and so forth. If we look at about 20 years ago, the leather industry employed 40,000 of workers in South Africa. If you look at the leather, the footwear, we only employ 40,000, 14. That's comparing to 20 of these stringent labor relations and the imports that we are faced with that comes to the country.
Yeah, I think also becoming inclusive, leveling playing fields, and so many issues, flexibility that Linda mentioned. I think there's
100%.
definitely, we have to work towards to that, because ultimately it's also the protection of the employees as well. There's a comment from Mohammed Awais that says natural dyes have fastness and reproducibility and availability issues. Okay, that I think we can probably, I think Olivia, do you want to add to something like that? Olivia, you've used natural dyes in your pineapple fiber, in your material. Have you had any issues around fastness and inequality issues?
Yes, definitely we've had challenges with quality because with natural dyes, there's still a lot of R&D being done around natural dyes, the process of using natural dyes in natural fabric. So there's still a lot of research going on around that. Definitely, natural dyes are not as pigmented as chemical-based dyes, and they're a bit dull. So there's still a lot of research that is going on around natural dyes. So yeah, it's something we've had a challenge on, and it's not as developed as chemical-based dyes. So it's something that still a challenge in generally. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also circularity, what we're forgetting is the market demand, that, people should also, us as civilians and consumers out there, we also play a huge responsibility in what we see and view as having good quality. If we see a leather and we want it to be very shiny and perfect and whatever, then, that might not be the case for organic or a pineapple fiber or a vegan leather or something like that. So we have to also change mindsets from a consumer perception, and that is quite critical going forward. we've got a question. Thank you, Olivia, for that. There's a question from Martina. What kind of technical support would you say is important when you begin to integrate circularity into your company's business model?
Hi, Zubeda, can I take that?
Sure.
Is that okay? Yeah, I'm so happy to answer this question. So, when we talk about circularity, it's about creating products and services that, no longer have a life cycle, which has a, starting, middle, and end. It has to be reused and recycled. So one thing that we have to keep in mind always when we are entering into the circular fashion model, so it's when we are designing the products, we always keep the pollutant and the waste out of the design parameter. So when you are designing products and sourcing the raw material, you always think about the recycling and reusing of that particular material. That has to be always in the mind. So there should not be any waste and any pollutant that can be kept out at the end or after their life is over. So that is the one basic training that we have to give ourselves and the workers and all our workforce that we work with. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm just checking logistics and for timing quickly. That's why I switched off my camera. And thank you for answering that, Anujita. Anybody else wants to tackle that question?
Yeah, I would also add to that. I think the important, I guess it's technical expertise, is ensuring that you have, you can bring in some form of circularity or systems thinking into your business, so that not only are you thinking about design, but you're also thinking about logistics, collection systems, partnering up and understanding where your products will end up and how they're going to come back, whether they come back to you, whether they come back through another collection system. It's making sure that you've thought about all of those components that you either have direct control over or indirect control. So it's making sure, I think that's one of the most important aspects, is just understanding the full picture and then working out what your role is and how you can do that to the best of your abilities.
Okay, thank you for that, Cindy, for answering as well. So you do require quite a bit of technical support going forward, but it's not impossible. And it's definitely, like I mentioned, there's lots of tools and guidance out there. You do require time and commitment and support from your team within the organization. I think that's quite critical as well. Bettina, you wanted to add to that?
I actually wanted to ask a question,
Sure.
but it adds up on everything that's been discussed. So I wonder, because we've heard quite a lot about sort of what needs to happen to make the system more sustainable, I would say, maybe also make the linear model more sustainable. So if we think about, yes, we will probably not tomorrow move to a system where there is no new production needed, because everything will be, I don't know, used twice as long and repaired and repurposed right away. So we also need to make production better. We need to involve the workers. We need to make sure that we have, for instance, more organic dyes. We've talked a bit about materials as well. I wonder if we look more into how the entire system might need to change, which will mean probably dematerialize the business value. Let's make sure that in the end, we do not use any virgin materials anymore, that everything stays in the loop much longer, and that also consumers buy into all of this, of course, which is very important. I guess this will also have quite an impact on workers, and it will have an impact on the way that due diligence is carried out at the moment, because, for instance, jobs might be shifting, there might be other skills that are needed, and all of this might also mean that the risk-based approach has to look at different risks. So I was just wondering if any of you have thought about that, and if these are discussions that are coming up, and if you have any recommendations for how this could affect due diligence going forward, and how the thinking on this should be structured.
Anybody wants to answer that? I'll just check the hands.
I think,
Alan?
Yeah, I think the reskilling and upskilling is very, very important here. And we have, for this year, by the way, I have engaged with 3 classes of 30 students for 3 months, for 3 different months. In fact, we have 90 students here. And we do, all these students are unemployed students. We try to upskill them with new innovations and so forth. Our product, by the way, all our products are 100% recycled. If we sell a product to a customer, we tell the customer, if you're tired of that product, of using it, bring it back to us. And we will recycle that product and give you the same product on a discounted price.
Okay, that's interesting, Alan. That's a very good take and a very good way of looking at things. And speaking to Bettina's, keeping materials longer in the system in itself. We've got a few questions also. I don't want to run over time. Just from Alison McCleavy, and she has a question on if leather versus plant-based versus synthetic materials for footwear is very interesting. Would you agree? It's all about longevity and durability. I think that's between Olivia and Alan. I think the two of you. What's your opinion? I think definitely sustainability, the aspect of longevity and durability with leather products is part of the sustainability of the product, taking care of, for instance, in South Africa, if we've got a very interesting program where when students leave their high school career, they leave their shoes behind, and these school shoes are then passed to other students. So it keeps, but obviously, school shoes are quite, can be worn and things like that. So we have to also educate the consumers on how to keep that, take care of the product in itself. So I think longevity and durability needs to be incorporated into sustainability, and leather products are quite good at doing that. As well, but also synthetic materials and other plant-based materials, all of them have different aspects, and you have to consider and impacts, which is environmental, social, and other things as well. So it depends if the synthetic material, what type of material, how was it produced, the recyclability of the material as well. So there's different types of aspects that you need to look at. Beverly Hall has a question that asks, are there any plans to develop a transition pathway for the industry? I'm not sure exactly what specific industry. Was it for the textile, for the garment and footwear supply chains, I would assume. Anybody want to answer that? I'm not too sure now.
I can jump in there in terms of what we're doing in collaboration at BSR. This is not a plan of the whole industry as a whole, but with this collaboration, we're planning to have different stakeholders and different brands and organizations joining the conversations around how we make this a just transition, right? Because it's not only about the environmental side, it's not only around the commercial side, but as I was mentioning at the beginning in the presentation, we have seen that the transition might impact both very positively, but also very negatively workers in the supply chain. So the idea of this collaboration will be to see how all together actually landed in solutions and policies and programs that are really addressing the main needs of workers in the supply chain, informal workers, women workers, migrant workers. So also how we make this transition environmentally important, but also how we make it socially relevant for all the stakeholders, and especially for the most vulnerable workers that are the ones that are going to be more affected in the whole transition. We saw, for example, a lot of impact in global South countries, in traditional production countries. We saw a big impact on women and migrants and informal workers. So also the conversation is around how we guarantee that all of these marginalized groups of workers will be able to participate fairly in the marketplace. And we are opening the conversation right now at BSR through this collaboration. So I just wanted to raise these here as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Laura. for that. I hope it answered the question or gave some insight. Evans has a question which says, how could African entrepreneurs could induce transfer of technologies on different products such as pineapple leather or cotton recycle? Maybe Olivia, you want to add to that? Right now, sorry, go on, Olivia.
I'm not quite sure what he means by transfer of technologies, like what specific technologies mean.
Yeah, it's not very specific, the question. I'm assuming that it's transfer of cleaner technologies for different products. I think also there is quite a large amount of programs. You have to look at UNEDO, and they're running a clean transfer technology program specifically within South Africa. And they will then be through Africa as well. And you can have a look at that. If you just Google clean transfer technology, then you can get some more information around that. Cleodna mentioned, the panel has mentioned collaboration being important a few times, and that is quite important in terms of working with different stakeholders. What are the priority areas in which the panelists would like to see collaboration to enable both a just and circular fashion system?
I'm happy to jump in here. I think I've talked about it quite a bit on the Keeping Workers in the Loop group, but for us, from our perspective, one of the biggest areas of transformation with circularity is going to happen around the collecting and sorting of end-of-use textiles, post-consumer textiles, because there will be a solution for turning those textiles into new raw materials. We're going to see not only production plants like ours being located in regions maybe that aren't traditionally industrial processing, certainly for the textile industry anymore. So for instance, we imagine our plants to be in Europe, in the US, in the early stages. And the transformation that will happen around post-consumer textiles and collection is going to be massive. It's going to move from manual sorting to automated sorting, which is going to impact workers' lives that are working in those that part of the supply chain or that part of the industry. It's going to create challenges, but also opportunities. We're going to see a lot higher volumes of textiles being collected, but we also need to see that moving to automated systems where a lot of it happens through machines and AI. So a lot of this change is going to influence, and if we don't manage it now, if we don't put dedicated energy to understanding what that change in the economic and job landscape is, we're going to end up paying later. So Cleona, that would be, I think you probably know already, one of the areas where I think we need a lot of focus on from the very beginning.
Thank you for answering that. If we have very quickly, I think Linda wanted to add to it as well.
Yes, just quickly on that one. I think that from our perspective, we would like to see collaboration on skill development, upskilling, reskilling. How do we do that in the best way? How do we define responsible business practices going forward in the circular fashion industry? And then also connected to what we have discussed earlier in this panel, like how do we actually create the flexible and context-based due diligence? These are sort of three areas that we would like to see collaborations on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That summed it up very nicely. Before we go, we would like to have any final comments, each panelist may be giving us. We've had some quite diverse backgrounds, but also people working within SMEs and organizations representing workers and their interests, and new business, circular business models as well. So we'd like to hear from each panelist, just a final remark, if you would like.
Hi, Zubeda, maybe jump in here.
Okay, sure, Anujita. That would be
Hi.
your final remark.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure,
So I
sorry.
would like to end with I would like to end with the one of the questions that Pauline has put in here. So I think that would be my final remarks also.
Sure.
So it's yeah, very interesting. Like we have been talking about circular fashions, but she has put light on the what about children, child laborers, young workers. So then due diligence play a really important role. Like when we talk about the labor laws that strictly prohibited child labor, so that then you have to control that there shouldn't be any child working with the mother at their home. Like when we talk about the home wave workers, our women artisans are tend to their many times they put their children to the work. Then we have to do like monitoring that sort of sudden visit to the areas and making arrangements for the kids that they should go to school or some other that sort of things we have to do at the ground level, and then due diligence can play a really important part. So that is there. I think with that I would like to make my final word in this, Ms. Zubeda. Thank you.
Thank you, Anujita. You've definitely added good value to the discussion, and brought a very important aspect as well. Olivia, you have any final remarks? Olivia, you are muted. Okay, we'll move on to Cindy. Any final remarks on the discussions and the topics that we've had?
I think it's been a very interesting conversation with lots of different angles. It's shed a light on the fact that there's quite a lot of work to do still, but equally progress is getting made. And I think collaboration and what's been happening in the last couple of years has been incredibly important for circularity. So we need more of that, especially in these areas where no one company can do the work alone. So I'm looking forward to more collaboration, more roadmaps, and more execution.
Thank you so much, Cindy. That is definitely important as well, that collaboration and that discussions amongst the different stakeholders. And, this cannot be done alone. That is quite obvious right now. Alan, are you there? Do you want to add something finally very quickly before?
I think, look, it was quite an interesting discussion, and it's something that each and every one of us, we cannot do it alone. We can never ever do it alone. As we are in this fourth industrial revolution, I think sustainability is our key, and how we go about collaboration and due diligence, it's when all the stakeholders come together.
Yeah.
And by the way, I must say that we go out of our way to other people that manufacture footwear and components that they cannot use, and we buy it back to remanufacture a brand new component. So for us, like if all the stakeholders can get together and we can make these things, we can achieve a lot more. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Linda, any final remarks about this important relationship between due diligence and circularity?
No, I mean, it's been so interesting to listen to the other panelists, and I think there is still so much to learn. And that's what I, bring with me. Like, we don't have maybe the answers to all the questions as of yet, but together we will find out the right way. So I just think we need to trust the vision, hold on to the vision and trust the process, because there is still so much to learn, but we need to be a little bit bold as well together.
Yeah. Bold and incorporate that flexibility definitely on this pathway of circularity. Olivia just mentioned there that her internet is poor, and she'll put her remarks in the chat, and she says she definitely agrees with Cindy. The industry is still very young, and there needs to be more collaborations in order to see more growth. Yeah, we need to. You want to add?
I must
quickly?
share my sincere apology that I could not do my presentation because of the internet. Unfortunately, at the closing part of it, I see it's perfect now. But anyway, thank you. We can always do it next time.
It's always like that. This technology sometimes fails us. What I
Okay.
can say is encourage the participants today to look the panelists up and, continue the conversation. I'm on LinkedIn, and if you panelists want to put down your LinkedIn, maybe your connections there, or your email addresses or anything like that, you can put it down in the chat if you want people to contact you. And then, the conversation will continue. I do not want to take more time and then just go to the closing. And I want to thank everybody for participating actively. There are quite a few questions still, but if we can just be patient, I think those questions can be transferred via email, or you can send it to us directly as well, and we can try and answer you further down the line. So we have from the EU, Maria Rincon-Levana, and she will be doing our closing remarks today. Maria has been working on circular economy policies for the past 6 years and currently holds a position of team leader within the unit in charge of the implementation of the Circular Economy Action Plan in the European Commission. So Maria also works on the field of circular economy textiles. So I think that's something that we all need to look up, as well as the Circular Economy Action Plan in the European Commission. I hand over to her to do the closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very interesting exchange. I have been following it very closely because we are very much aware of the impacts of the textile value chain on the environment and on social aspects. And it's always interesting to see and to hear from those implementing it on the ground, what are the challenges related to implementing due diligence obligations, and where are the hotspots, and where are the places where we can find benefits and facilitate this communication along the value chain. As has been mentioned here and there, that's an interesting agenda coming up for the European Union as regard of textile and sustainability of textiles. To put a little bit into context why we are doing this, let me remind that the European Commission adopted in 2019, the European Green Deal that sets a very holistic and ambitious agenda to promote sustainable growth, looking at different sectors of the EU economy and how we can mainstream sustainability across the board in order to ensure that we have an economy that takes to the planet, that gives back to the planet more than it takes, and that we can become and we can together address environmental challenges such as climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss. And I think that circularity becomes a key aspect of our action in order to respond to these challenges. And it's specifically relevant for the case of textiles. As you know, the value chain has relevant impacts as regard of emissions of CO2, but also pollution and consumption of natural resources. And this is the negative side. I want to also flag the important weight in the economy, in the global economy of this sector, and the capacity to bring innovations and changes into the value chain, and also to encourage and facilitate for consumers this mindset change that we really need in order to achieve a new economy. The European Commission then, after and following the announcements in the Circular Economy Action Plan, it's currently working on the preparation of a strategy for sustainable textiles, considering sustainability both from the point of view of the environment, but also social. And what this strategy is going to do, and it's going to be adopted very soon, so I am sorry I cannot give away completely all the details of the policy framework, is to set a coherent framework, a set of policies that implemented together will have as a maximum or as a final goal to reduce environmental footprint and the carbon footprint of EU consumption of textiles. And this we will do it by looking at the whole life cycle in the spirit of circular economy. A circular economy is a model where we keep the materials and the resources and the products in the economy for as long as possible while minimizing waste. And I think this is the elements that we need to keep in mind when thinking on sustainability for environmental sustainability for textiles. Circular economy is also a clear agenda for sustainable social sustainability because creates new business opportunities that are very much linked to the social economy. And I think that some panelists have mentioned the gender dimension, the fact that the value chains are populated with women workers that need to see their rights respected, and think that the circular economy offers opportunities to also step up our action on these fields. So, as I was saying, the strategy will present a holistic set of actions, policy of actions looking at design of textiles, how to make them last longer, be more repairable and durable, and also actions to support the uptake of reuse, and how we can as well support new business models. And I think it has been mentioned as well as a way to foster the implementation of due diligence. We will also look specifically on how to reduce waste. Textile waste is increasing. It's very much linked to new consumption models and to the increase of consumption of textiles. And I think that for that we need to look into design, but also facilitate and support and support with investments and funding the uptake of new infrastructure and recycling technologies that would allow us in Europe to recycle more and to only export products of high quality. And when it's under strict requirements and conditions, export as well waste only to those countries where they have the capacities to manage it sustainably, because there's as well a benefit into supporting the uptake of these technologies and this infrastructure in other countries. From the point of view of social, I don't want to forget that there's a double dimension. On one hand, we need to really ensure that the reuse sector in Europe flourishes because it's linked with the social economy, but we also need to make sure that we respect social rights along the value chain. And for that, of course, the European Commission is working to present an initiative on due diligence that will set an horizontal duty for companies. This initiative is in preparation and will be presented in the coming days or weeks. Specifically for textiles, it has been identified as one of the sectors where these pressures are the highest. Of course, there's it's relevant to look at the implementation of this initiative, but I think that this needs to be coupled with better transparency and better traceability along the value chains. And we have in the pipeline initiative that will help to facilitate this along the value chain, so to connect better the different actors. And I see the potential of the digital product passport, for instance, in order to facilitate that there's no gaps in between different parts of the value chain, first tier, second tier, third tiers, but also there's several initiatives at EU level and international level that are working on improving traceability. And for instance, UNEP is supporting a project that is called Intex project, that is to facilitate the flow of information and to also improve the information within the company as regards of increased resource efficiency. So as you see, there's a set of policy tools that will be put in place in the European Union. But I don't see them as acting in isolation. The textile value chain is global, and we really need to work together so we can mainstream the positive effects of these actions as well in the businesses and the companies of other countries, because circular economy, it's an agenda that is positive no matter where you are in the world, and we really need to keep supporting the uptake of resource efficiency, and as well couple this with respecting social rights. And with this, I will return the floor to the chair, the moderator, Sabel, I hope, or Zubeida.
Zubeida, thank you.
Hi,
No worries.
Zubeida, thank you.
Nice meeting you. This brings us to the end of this very important discussion, and I think it was so important to listen to all the panelists and their views and bringing together, you know, how important due diligence, transparency, and all those aspects are to circularity and sustainability ultimately. The textiles and garment manufacturing and footwear and leather industry right now is really being focused on globally, and we do need to bring together all the different actors, from governments to NGOs to consumers to companies, of course, and have them all collaborating and discussing how we're going to move forward, because there's only one way to move now. In fact, it is a circular way, but that is the one way that we're going towards. It's not only linear anymore. So thank you all for the information, and for sharing your experiences. And also, if I'm not sure where this recording will be available, if you want to quickly just put it down, but do a search on the UNEP website, Intex website. There's many links that has been added to the chat. If anybody can just, if you want more information, please do contact the relevant organizers. Thank you so much, and it was interesting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.